Welcome back, everybody, to BRUBBLE, a podcast gathering young voices and perspectives from in and around the Brussels bubble. And today, on our almost monthly panel episode, in lieu of the new year arriving in all its force, and maybe a few weeks late, I mean, we should have maybe done this on January the 1st, we're going to be going over some of the predictions that others made for 2023. And then, adding a touch of, flavor, a touch of a nice ingredient here or there to see if these predictions actually hold up, what we think of them, and how they'll go. But before we do that, we're going to go around the table and introduce ourselves and, tell people a bit about what we've been doing in our New Year holidays or festivities. Julien, would you like to start? I don't think I've started with you yet.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Julien. I'm the editor of the French Dispatch, a European political expert, a geopolitical analyst, and a guy from Emmanuel Macron's party, Renaissance. Looking forward to talking more about pension reform this lovely, lovely month. And this Christmas, I've just been relaxing for once, honestly. I just spent a lot of time reading, honestly. I've already read 6 or 7 books this month. I'm just enjoying the down period, really.
Interesting. Yeah, one of my resolutions is maybe to read a bit more, because but then again, for me, I love reading just in a Brussels park in the sunshine.
Yeah, it's nice.
And with the birds chirping around you, the little parakeets sprinkled here and there.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's like -1 degree that. But we'll see how this goes. You'll see me in June sometime. Anyways, I'm Simon. Simon van Hoeven. I work for Microsoft's European Government Affairs here in Brussels. I host this podcast as a side project, not affiliated with Microsoft in any means, where I just talk with people about cool political stories happening here and there, and join this podcast throughout the new year as we have a stellar lineup planned in the weeks and months to come. Nikos.
My name is Nikos. I'm from Greece. I work at the European Commission at the Secretariat General in the unit that prepares the briefings for the President and the Vice Presidents. But of course, I'm here on my personal capacity. And on the side, I also like to be co-chair of the Economy and Trade Working Group at the biggest student youth organization in Europe, the European Democratic Students. And yeah, I'm excited to be here again today for another episode. I think, Simon, basically what you told us is that you don't like reading books, because I would like to say that since the beginning of the year, there have only been 28 hours of sunshine in Brussels.
I saw that today.
But I would say that my break went pretty nice, even though the work didn't stop, not even on Christmas. But I managed to go to Washington, D.C. I really enjoyed it. And I would say my resolution for this year is to go for the first time in my life camping. I'm starting small.
Fair enough. When you said the ca sound, I was getting optimistic about going to Canada. You could go camping in Canada.
I could go to Canada as well.
Knock off 2 birds with that one stone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Joao, sitting at the far end of the table again in your customary gloomy corner.
Yes,
is everything good with this gloomy Portuguese man on our side?
No, I don't think so, man. I don't think so. And first of all, I wish you all a super 2023 to you and to the attendants. My name is João Pontes. I'm Portuguese, and my field of expertise are geopolitics and international trade. I dealt with the Recovery and Resiliency Facility and with the European semester at the European Commission, and also took part on the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the EU in 2021. My holidays were very busy. I spent a lot of time in not so sunny Portugal this time. It was raining all the time, so unfortunately I didn't do that much outdoor activities, but I took the time to do some reading.
I sense a common theme here. Reading we'll be going for, I suppose.
Yes, prepare for this podcast.
I think mindfulness is the word we're looking for.
Well, I say getting in touch with your emotions, which is a topic I'll be covering on my podcast in a few weeks' time. Stay tuned for that one. Anyways, I think it's been about a month and a half since we did our last episode where we ranked the top political stories of 2022. So it only seems natural to follow up with our top predictions of 2023. And I kind of wanted to start from the top again, because our top story for 2022 was Ukraine, which I think aged pretty well. I mean, there's no way it wouldn't have, and I'm hoping everything will go well in that situation. For 2023, the way we're going to roll out this podcast is We're going to read a prediction somebody else made, a notable think tanker, a notable politician, a notable head of state, something like that, and then we're going to analyze it a little, see what we think about it. So, going back to Ukraine, that terrible transition, I'm going to start off by quoting somebody from SIPA, the think tank here in Brussels, Edward Lucas, who wrote on New Year's Day, 2023 could go far better for Ukraine than many expect, pointing to the fact that in 2022 we learned the Kremlin is weaker than we ever thought, and that Ukraine is far stronger than most outsiders, even Ukrainians themselves, believed. Do we share his tone of optimism? And by that, I am very much lingering on the thought that as we're going into New Year, I think we should be very cognizant that European support has been strong, but many have been wondering if it's strong enough. Has enough been done, especially as we're on the day that the tanks got finally announced, or the day after the tanks finally got announced being sent over there. So, who wants to start off this important topic? Julien, I see you nodding beside me.
I know a lot when you talk. But for me, it's an interesting question because nobody can take this for granted. And speaking to a lot of Ukrainians and working with a lot of Ukrainians in general, particularly those connected to what's happening in Ukraine right now, there is a question about whether anybody's doing enough. And we are doing a lot, but we have to remember that the Ukrainian military is fighting an uphill battle purely because of the sheer numbers of Russian troops attacking them and participating in the invasion. There's some good news, which is that the mobilization of prisoners is no longer working the way it was supposed to be because the Wagner Corps cannot actually recruit as they were. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that they're currently speaking about another mobilization wave in Russia, tells us that things are not going well, and we keep hearing stories about mutinies in various groups in Ukraine right now. However, a lot of it depends on the strength of spirit of the Ukrainian people, as well as whether or not we can keep providing weapons, particularly tanks now, because if we're honest, the number of tanks we're sending aren't actually enough, and on top of this, they're likely to only be ready sometime in March, April, May, which is an issue.
And on top of that, even, we've been making a really big deal about the German tanks being sent over. But Germany is taking what some say an outsized amount of the blame when we look at the French. Where are their Leclerc tanks? Have they been sent yet? Questions like that still linger about the cooperation from all European allies.
For sure, and there is a sense that because they are the most influential states in the EU, the French and German forces have been taking a lot of the blame. In some ways, rightly so, but in many ways, not necessarily. Though I will say that the SPD was acting in an incredibly poor way, and I don't buy a lot of the claims that it was a genius tactical move to force Americans to send tanks as well. And I think it was more an opportunistic way of attempting to avoid the conversation for political gain internally while the polls went in the right direction.
I feel like, Julien, you're saying a lot, but you're not really providing a temperature of the water of how you think it'll turn out. And, I mean, should I turn to warmer corners? Joao, Nikos, any thoughts on how do you think the situation in Ukraine will evolve? Do you sharing optimism that we can pull together?
I'm hearing a lot of what the Kremlin is saying, and in my head, in a way, I'm gonna say in quotations, adjusting for inflation. So, for instance, Medvedev, who is turning out to be quite an influential player, I would say, in the Kremlin, in the backstage of this war, a very strong and ardent supporter of Putin and the Kremlin status quo right now in Russia. I will say one thing about him specifically, that we underestimated him when he was prime minister / president, basically Putin's number two. I think we saw him too much, I would say, as a puppet, and too little as an own singular actor that works to progress those objectives of certain powers that influence the Kremlin right now. But he said that they've set their red lines, and that should something along the lines of, should Russia lose the war, they will not be afraid to use all weapons in their disposal, of course making a sort of allusion to the nuclear capabilities and nuclear arsenal of the Russian Federation. Now, all these things, to me, what they scream is desperation. So we sit here in Brussels, we need to think certain things. Number one, all Ukrainians are doing what they need to do. That begs the question, are we doing all that we can and should do to make sure that the men and women in Ukraine, the civilians, the leadership, military and civilian leadership, and just the average citizens, the average consumers, the average mother, father, grandmother, son, daughter, and so on and so forth, have what they need to continue being resistant, have all the weapons they need, because this war has changed very radically over almost 11 months, because the needs of Ukraine changed as the phases of the war progressed. I think all this, I would say, red tape that we have at binational level, saying like, oh no, I will not send tanks, I will not be rather the first to send tanks, or they should first send tanks, or I think this is all a little preposterous, because while we're discussing all these red lines, there are people dying, fighting for their freedom as well as democracy and freedom in Europe, and in a way against what I see as this, in a way, totalitarian ideology and force that wants to just say that I want to get this land out of power and I will get it. So we need to stop this, and we need to provide everything that Ukraine needs militarily, of course with some restrictions which understandably will not escalate the conflict further, but at the same time, now the issue is tanks. Before it was other things, after it will be other things. We need to make sure that that we are properly on the right side of history, because you can't be on the right side of history with one foot. And I am sure of the good intentions of a lot of European leaders, and I understand that they don't want to antagonize, to create internal European and Western issues, but at the same time, they need to think the magnitude of the situation and the fact that history right now rests on the shoulders of a lot of these men and women making these decisions, and they need to make sure that those are the right ones. The Kremlin is weaker than we thought, much weaker. Prigozhin will be a much more powerful ally in 2023 for Russia and for Putin specifically, and he is becoming essentially an invaluable and inseparable piece to the puzzle of Putin's Kremlin, and Ukraine is far stronger than everyone expected, and that starts with the morale of its citizens.
Fair enough. That's a good rallying cry here.
Yes, it is. We'll try not to screw up after this brilliant intervention of Nikos. I have a little bit of, my opinion is a little bit darker than this. I mean, I stand by the fact that the Ukrainians are doing very well, pretty much more than what we or most people would have thought in the beginning. Although I think that what people want to know is if we predict that if the war is going to end this year or if it's here to stay, and in which format. So, and this leads me to expose some things, like for instance the use of the tanks. Are the Ukrainians actually planning on mounting a huge counteroffensive that they actually need the tanks to succeed? Because are they going to defeat Russia with that? Should we focus on giving another type of support, namely, for instance, drones, other type of weapons, or even air defense missiles? Because having tanks without guaranteeing, for instance, air superiority against a powerful foe, I don't know what is going to be the actual use for it. This is the first thing. The second thing that is worrying me about is this joint exercises again between Russia and Belarus. There's still always lingering in the air the possibility of an intervention by Belarus, although maybe we should disregard it, maybe not. But there is always that thing, and we already approached in one of the previous podcasts that we discussed. So we don't know if in 2022 they can have an upgrade on their degree of involvement into the war. And the third thing that is being overlooked, but I think it should something that we should point it out, is the tensions looming in the Western Balkans again. And why am I portraying the Western Balkans again? The conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. Serbia is a historical, very important ally to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And a conflict on that area, again, will divert attentions both from the US and the European Union to their immediate neighborhood. Although they already have troops there, but this can actually divert attentions, and also in order to deal with the crisis, they can actually be in the need to divert also funding. And for the fourth thing that I would like to point out, for us to find a solution nowadays, since there is almost a stalemate in terms of the situation, the most important thing that we should look for is a face saving for everyone.
That's controversial.
That is how you actually. No, I'm not saying, when I'm saying, like, if you want to reach an agreement, in this case, for instance, Ukraine or Zelensky will not admit, and I totally understand, concessions. On the other hand, we need to understand what is acceptable for Putin and Kremlin for them to say, okay, we should stop this. This is the face saving that I'm talking about.
Maybe they should understand
that they
what
should
are
withdraw.
the red lines.
Yeah, but one of the things that we need for any type of resolution to this conflict to begin with is we need credible security guarantees for Ukraine from the West. That has to be in place before any resolution to this conflict will come to be. And personally, looking at the state of the EU right now, looking at America's flip-flop approach, we're sending a lot of money, but we're very on the fence here and there, I don't think they'll get security guarantees in the current political environment. I don't know if that's something that we're willing or able to give.
Who Ukraine won't get?
Yeah.
But the thing is, Russia wants to pretend it's the guarantor of peace in the eastern neighborhood. But Russia's guarantees, security guarantees more than anything, are not worth the paper on which they signed them on.
But are our security guarantees worth more?
I mean, Europe was not the
Yeah.
one that guaranteed that they would not invade Ukraine in exchange for all the Soviet nuclear arsenal in Ukrainian territory.
True.
So, I mean, what Europe is willing, from my perspective, to guarantee is peace and prosperity for a strong and free Ukraine. Unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe for some others, Europe does not have an army, but we do have very strong nations that together can come together and discuss how we can support. There is no nuclear umbrella that can provide security guarantees for Ukraine. But at the same time, I think the direction that the West has taken in the war so far is strong. It can be stronger, but we should not underestimate it, because at the same time, do we want to start a third world war?
It's true, but I'm not sure. I'm more pessimistic that anything will happen given our attitude. But Julien, you're mumbling and grumbling. Apologies.
More scowling than anything, but there's a couple of things that I disagree with there, because Europe, by proxy, did have security guarantees for Ukraine through the support for the United Kingdom's guarantees and the US's guarantees when Ukraine gave up its nuclear positions, same guarantees that Russia gave. Our guarantees aren't worth as much. They're worth as much as what Russia's are, to be honest. But there was one or two things that I want to. I mean, maybe it's because I'm not working for an EU institution right now, so I can be a bit more critical. But what we're doing right now, our guarantees aren't worth anything. Like, the guarantees of EU member states towards other EU member states aren't concrete, which is why most member states are part of NATO, and this is why, paradoxically, why lots of member states don't necessarily trust in the idea of an EU army, which is one of the things that we as a party and we as a country have been pushing quite hard. But I just wanted to react very quickly to the point that Nikos made on the shifting alliances within the Kremlin. I can never pronounce the guy's name, but Prigozhin or whatever, Prigozhin. He was actually sidelined 2 weeks ago, and we've seen that there are signs of the Kremlin moving back towards a traditional focus on the actual Russian military, with the shuffling of generals and the appointments of a new man to lead the Ukrainian invasion. And I think that's either going to lead to another stalemate like we saw in the East, or it's going to end up causing a problem where their war effort just stutters and the beginning of tanks, which will start snowballing eventually, will start pushing the Russians out of certain points. But the key part that I think will show us if there's a victory of Ukraine on the horizon is if Russia manages to lose Crimea for whatever reason, or if Russia loses Mariupol. Because at that point, the Russian efforts and the Russian defensive lines will be broken, and also supply lines, which will have a huge effect.
Fair enough. So I think this is a pretty contentious issue going forward. For me, just to wrap it up, the way I see that what we should be doing as the EU, as Europe, should be offering a more step-by-step process for Ukraine integration into the EU. Whereas if we start on a customized, I suppose, step-by-step process where we start negotiations as soon as possible, we can already offer Ukraine access to EU funding, access to EU processes well during the negotiating processes. And Ukraine, being the economy that is, being the farm-powered, industrial power that is, should be in such a position where we, as the EU, should be able to go up and say we can offer you a special customized journey to EU membership, where we can offer you more than before. And I think that would be a very credible show of force on our end that we are supporting Ukraine to an extent that we haven't been seeing before, beyond just the words, beyond our defense spending, beyond our investments in Ukraine, which are almost less than America as a whole bloc, which is embarrassing. But regardless, I think at least the tides of war are not as gloomy as they were in February 2022, and we've seen Russia falter, which is great news. But yeah, I think that's a pretty somber note to leave it on. And any optimistic parts about the Ukraine scenario, if I can say it that way?
We should not forget that there still is a war on European soil. I see a lot of people getting fatigued, and I always tell them, at least there are no missiles raining down on our heads. Don't forget how great we have it. And I just want to say, Russia won't lose the territories. Ukraine will win them, and that's a difference.
Fair enough, Nikos. So moving onwards then, tied into the Ukraine situation a bit, because we talked a lot about support for Ukraine, support that's happening across the Atlantic Ocean. And that leads us to the point of transatlantic ties between Europe and the USA, which is a contentious issue, especially we saw in December with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, passing in America and causing a whole hubris of attention being thrown onto it from here, which we've seen, develop in interesting manners over the past few weeks. Sources like Richard Haas of the CFR and other mainly American sources that I see predict that transatlantic ties could also suffer from these emerging differences, both over to extend the military, economic, and diplomatic support for Ukraine, levels of defense spending, as well as the economic indicators going around, like the IRA. What do we think of his statement? As all of us are Europeans, I know I have a Canadian accent, but I have a Dutch passport. Are we as optimistic or as pessimistic as Richard Haas? Do we think that the transatlantic relationship, this special connection our two continents have, will come out stronger in 2023? Joao, would you like to start?
Well,
I'm gonna
come up
as the
stronger.
discoverer of America.
Yes. As a discoverer of America, Terra Nova. As they call, actually, nowadays Canada, not United States. But concerning this, our transatlantic relationships, I don't see. I think that in 2023 they are going to get gloomer. I don't think that they are going to improve, and especially because of the geopolitical competition that has entered into force. Namely because of the Inflation Reduction Act. So at first glance, when it was first announced, the European Union actually praised the plan, because the main objective was actually to give or try to put the US into the path of transition to a green economy. But when they actually look at the plan, they say, oops, this looks like protectionism, blunt protectionism.
But on that hand, my argument has always been, has the EU not been engaging in protectionism in these sectors for years? And when America tries to, turn its head a little bit, protect its own interests slightly, that's when we realize how fickle our efforts have been. It's all collapsing in on us.
One thing is, you cannot advocate for free commerce on one stand and try to portray yourself as a multilateral speaker or a multilateral agent and try to promote some type of agreements and then inside try to move towards this type of approach. I mean, it's not that I don't understand. I understand that the United States do this.
Yeah.
The issue is how things are presented. And of course, I mean, this sounds very grim for us, for the European Union, in a sense that we are losing geopolitical leverage again, and we are losing in two fronts, because first, energy prices are cheaper in the United States than here, which means that they already have comparative advantages in production. So, in first glance, Europeans decision makers are fearing that some of the companies actually move towards the US in search of a better way to actually produce. And of course, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with this incentive plans for getting greener and tax breaks and subsidies and stuff for a green agenda, it actually is making it worse, because companies realize that if they stay here in Europe, they will not be able to compete in the same level playing field as with the companies in the US. Therefore, it's another incentive for companies here based here in Europe to move to make the jump towards the other side of the Atlantic. And this is a very grim situation that decision makers in the European Union are actually trying to counteract. And how they are trying to counteract, that's the most important thing. So first attitude that the EU took is like what they usually do when a crisis comes up, which is create a task force. So to address the joint.
I do love how this happened too. And immediately when the crisis happened, we sent over a minister and we're like, please set up a task force.
Yeah, that's a very much European thing. So they just said this time it's a joint EU-US task force in order to address the EU's concerns. So in order for us to complain to the US on the measures that they are putting forward, and also the European Commission, of course, they try to find a way forward for this situation, and they are trying to promote like a new fund. So basically, asking for collecting more debt.
Yeah.
Creating a fund implies creating more debt in order to finance our industry, in order to make it a level playing field with the US. This was promptly rejected by France and Germany. And of course, in this sense, they are right, because there are funds and schemes that are not being used or not being used at its full capacity, that the funding can be allocated to actually help the industry. So, and the other thing that they want to do is make the state aid more flexible. So the way that the member states actually promote aid to the companies via tax credits or subsidies to make it easier at the European level. And of course, this was just the first thing that popped out, but then France actually took the lead and promoted like the Made in Europe, which is like a counteract to the IRA. And this actually has four main pillars, which is set production targets for the period of 2030.
Yeah.
So in order for us to reduce our own dependencies. Also, again, soften the state aid rules in order for providing tax credits and subsidies to green technology, and also to raw materials. This is very important. And establishing a sovereignty fund, in this case, is to reallocate funding that is not already being disbursed, and also use 221 billion of loans that is not yet used. So this is actually a great amount of money that can still be used in favor of the European industry. And last but not least, this is very important, France calls for trade defense. So it's European Union who actually has the prerogative for the commercial policy. So in this sense, France is actually asking for the Commission to use all the defensive instruments that they have in accord and to promote it, especially in regards to the WTO, so the World Trade Organization. What they are actually asking for is protectionism.
So, with this set of efforts, can we not say that transatlantic relations are reset to be stable? And Julien, I'm sure you've had a bit more focus on this of Macron's little voyage to America in December to sort this matter out. Has it not been sorted?
So there's two currents when it comes to thinking about transatlantic relations in 2023, and one's the short term and one's the long term. So I mean, short term, while everybody's trying to figure out what's going to happen with this Buy European Act and how Europe is going to respond to the IRA. And on top of that, when we're combining to support Ukraine, and also while just about every member state in Europe is trying to increase their funding, I mean, particularly in France, I think we're putting forward 450 billion-ish just to modernize our army, which takes us into the top half of military expenditure in Europe. It's going to strengthen in that aspect, but like Joao said, we need to respond to the IRA, and the reality is that's going to cause a lot of friction. And no one can really say how that's going to play out, but we are a geopolitical competitor with the US, and we always have been. No matter what the domain is, no matter what's been going on, we've always been the US's competitor. I mean, particularly France, we've been doing this for like 100 years now, ish.
I think that's a bold statement, just for the record, but go on.
Go back to the Charles de Gaulle presidency, you'll see real transatlantic competition.
Just gonna let that lead, but go on.
But
I think you're missing China, but go on.
No, but I'm not saying we're the main US thing, but we are one of the competitors, or at least we wanted to think we were. But the reality is that we don't know how damaging any of these are going to be, because the Buy European Act hasn't been announced properly yet, and we don't know what's actually going to come out of the initial efforts. And also, we don't know whether, for example, on our list, we've got something on Taiwan. We don't know what's going to happen in Taiwan to push us there. We don't know about our efforts to combat Chinese and Russian influence in Africa and the Middle East, and how we may combine or work with or compete with the US in these aspects. We don't know if there's going to be an entirely new, for example, the CHIPS Act. It could lead to better cooperation with the US, and we don't know what's going to happen. What we do know, however, is 2024, when we've got elections all over the place, including in the US, that's when we could have a lot of problems if we have Santos, for example, who becomes president and takes a very protectionist position compared to Biden.
Yeah, and I will say, even like more on the regulatory front, like a lot has been said about the regulatory coherence between European frameworks and American frameworks, and at least under Biden, we're seeing good progression in the right direction. So, for instance, data flows seems to be, moving positively. By the summer, we should have a very somewhat optimistic solution to this, and maybe this is the year to get these regulatory approaches in, to get this progress made before the uncertainty of 2024. And that might be on the top of the mind of European decision makers going beyond the IRA. But I know, Nikos, you haven't spoken yet. Is there anything you want to mention, or you content to hide?
I was actually waiting for the French person to stop, to make a point, rather.
French person.
Nikos, you should, Joao, you shouldn't be talking.
Yeah, where's he coming from?
All right. I agree with part of Joao's point. He did say that when it came out, we all applauded the IRA, and then we were like, oh, wait a minute. When we looked at the fine print, we're like, this is quite protectionist. As a matter of fact, I'll have you know. You know what? It is. On the other hand, I would not go as far as to call America a competitor. It is a little bit a protectionist measure, and I'm not denying this. However, if we look at, for instance, the TTC, the Trade and Technology Council that was set up,
super important.
This forum was, and still is, incredibly relevant for us to have a place where we can get at both a political, but more especially at a technical level, and discuss the European Union administration together with the US federal administration, and say, like, look, we have a problem with this, we don't agree with this, how can we find the common ground? This is not what competitors do. Competitors compete. They don't.
But you
discuss.
can be allies and competitors.
Yeah, that's not really how you presented it, though.
No, but that's a simple fact. We are allies, but we compete in the
Yes.
markets and geopolitically.
Yes, I will say the timing of this is a little bit in America's favor, and I'm pretty sure this came into play because the war in Ukraine has put America at a bit. It has demonstrated rather the difference between Europe and America on a lot of fronts, diplomatically, militarily, economically, in some aspects more than others. But it has demonstrated that we need to wake up, that all of us need to wake up. We don't really live in a world where we're all buddies and everyone wants to trade with the European Union and this and that. But America also needs to realize that if you keep turning your back on a lot of issues on your closest ally, you'll one day wake up and realize that you've lost your closest ally. Because
tell that to a Canadian.
look, if we look at, for instance, a lot of countries in Africa, they were not content with the support that they were receiving, I'll say from the West, but predominantly it comes down to the those security guarantees that we talked about before, military and so on and so forth, and security. And they said, well, you know what? I'll just turn to the Wagner Group because they will turn a blind eye if I massacre a few people, if I commit a little bit of genocide. Whereas for us, at least, it's certainly not the same. It will not fly under the radar. And I understand all the historic criticism that may arise from this point, but we don't live 500 years ago. We live in 2023. And while I understand and recognize and do not take anything away from the history of the entire world, and that includes Europe and colonialism, at the same time, we are in 2023. So I think we should cooperate. Both sides need, before we try to, not try, but before we hash this out, Europe needs to demonstrate that it can and we will stand on our own. The initiatives that President von der Leyen announced, the Green Industrial Act, it was? What was the name?
I'm blanking on this one too.
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, because I think it was G dip something. Okay, anyway, the Sovereignty Fund, which was also announced but at a later date. There are a lot of instruments. At the same time, leaders of Europe need to understand that certain problems, a lot of the problems we face today, require European solutions, whether we like it or not. Because I'm also tired of listening people criticize the European Union and they're like, and this and that. I'm like, a lot of these people are people that you're voting for that are going and wreaking havoc when it's time to negotiate something as important, for instance, like the digital global corporate tax. And I'm not naming any countries. Anyone that wants to know which these are can go and look at for themselves. But the reason this has not been adapted is because certain characters within Europe are not content with it. At the same time, I also look at France and Germany, and they're against collectivizing and mutualizing further debt, but they're not against making more lax state aid rules, which, of course, are going to benefit a country like Germany and France more than they're going to benefit a country like Malta or Cyprus or Estonia or Latvia that does not have the industrial base, that does not have the funding. So, and I think state aid is something that's flying under the radar a little bit because of COVID and the fact that we still have very lax state aid rules. But really, really, a lot of people have come out and said and told Europeans to just tread lightly on that, because this can really, really undo the internal market. Because you can't have some states incapable of funding their industries and some others just plunging money into theirs, where you create, again, some countries up here and other countries down here. And as a Greek who has experienced austerity, and it's not pretty, I do not want to further go down the line and see Greece just reneging right when we're beginning to get back up on our feet. So just to say, I think transatlantic ties could suffer, and very important what you said, Julien, for the U.S. elections. But you know what? They don't have to suffer, and that's up to both sides to go around the table and make sure that does not happen.
Yeah, because I think this issue really exposed a lot of the internal, struggles within the European Union. It's really like a litmus test. The litmus test that the Ukraine war was, but the one that this is, I think, really a real life trade scenario where there's no good or bad side. There's no easy solution out. And with the Russian war aggression in Ukraine, it's just you fund more, you send more money, you support in any way you can. Whereas here, it's how do we entice these 27 different competing interests. But
And it's also a question of, and I think this is something that people have forgotten, especially recently with the war in Ukraine. International relations and diplomacy and geopolitics isn't necessarily about good and bad or good and evil or wrong, right and wrong. A lot of it is grey, and it's mostly about what is considered in the best interests of certain actors at a certain time.
Yeah.
And people often forget that this is the case in politics, even at the local level, but this is something that is particularly forgotten when it comes to something like transatlantic ties, because can you really say anything is bad or good when it comes to this?
Should we perhaps move on? Or
in the
make your
interest of
final
time.
point?
No. In
Okay.
the interest of time, I was going to say we need to go to the next point.
No, I was going to have a quick transition question, ask the table, poll a really good prediction for 2023, and which is, will Ursula von der Leyen's pony-killing wolf escape justice in 2023? Yes or no, going around the table.
Ursula von der Leyen has a wolf.
No, but her pony got killed by a wolf, and she's launched a manhunt for it in Germany.
This is why she's not defense minister anymore.
She would use all
You
the
haven't heard
weapons.
this story.
Jesus.
I have, but maybe let's not get into that.
Okay,
please.
I'm gonna let that one go then.
Actually,
when
no.
it stops recording.
Yeah, we'll talk about it afterwards. I left this question on because I think it really exposes well, I suppose, the other conflicts we're ignoring around the world, the other major nations making strides. But as Richard Haas again said, sorry I mentioned his name twice, but the sleeper story of the year will be Japan's emergence as a major geopolitical actor. I might disagree with that. And in that sense, I want to ask, who will be the sleeper geopolitical agent of 2023? Will it be Iran? Will it be India? Will it be Japan? Or will it be, which my guess will be, Turkey?
You know what? Why I will disagree
Why did
with
he
your
point
point.
it to you?
I
He
don't
said
know.
when he said.
I am sure it was.
Did you see his
completely,
lean in as
Yes.
soon as...
Are you Turkish now?
sexually-
That's because you grew
But
a beard.
we'll give you a few seconds here
Guys,
to
a
go
lot
off.
of punches below the belt.
But Turkey
You know
is a local geopolitical power.
Exactly, that's what I was.
Yeah.
It's not a local one. I would say it's a regional.
Yeah, no, for sure,
bordering
yeah.
Global geopolitical power. As much as I don't like to say this.
The question was sleeper geopolitical agent, though. And
Iran is
I
not
think
a sleeper geopolitical.
Iran is not a sleeper, yeah.
I will tell
I
you.
still think it's being overlooked.
I think.
I could agree with that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Let's let Nikos actually make his point because you've got
Yes,
the like
go on, Nikos.
You know what? I'm not going to speak a lot on Japan because I don't know the issue as well as I would have liked. But in my opinion, in the region, the real sleeper geopolitical actor is South Korea. And the one
Yeah.
that has the bigger potential to be an even bigger geopolitical actor, and very sleeper one because it's small, is Taiwan.
Yes, we'll talk about Taiwan in a second. But I think those are good points as well, and I'm surprised you didn't linger on Turkey. Are there any other sleeper sleeper geopolitical agents we want to discuss around the table before we move on to the next prediction?
Poland.
That's it. We'll also discuss that one in a second if we have time for it.
Yes, but I would actually argue that Japan's always been a sort of a sleeper geopolitical power anyway, because the fact that if you actually look at the statistics of the Japanese economy and the military and everything, it's so powerful. The only reason why Japan is not more... And I surprisingly know a lot about Japan because the culture is fascinating to me. But the reason why they don't have that is because the article in the constitution that bans them from having an active military. They have a military in all but name as it is, and it's an incredibly powerful one. And if it's used in concert with the US and European actors and local allies, it can, not necessarily unsurprisingly to the international community, stand and fight a good fight against even China.
Mm-hmm.
The question more is, when it got to the point where it needed to awaken, how quickly could the process go? Because Shinzo Abe, when he was prime minister, he made a lot of efforts to try to reactivate the Japanese military, and a lot of people were more concerned about triggering a conflict with China than doing anything bad. And I think once that goes, things will progress quite quickly, I think.
Yeah, because
that's the point here. This is historical.
Yeah.
Again, this is historical. The documents that were put forward in December 2022, so the National Defense Strategy and the Defense Build-Up Program, historical not only because it will augment significantly the investment on military for Japan, but also it marks a trend within the Japanese people, because for first time since long time, they are actually strongly behind supporting these measures.
Yeah.
So they actually perceive themselves, and the document actually stated, they perceive themselves what happened in Europe with Russia. They can very much see it happening, China invading Taiwan. So they are actually starting to fear, people in Japan, the Japanese are starting to fear for some type of conflict to be looming in the horizon. And also they're starting to fear their relationships towards Russia, because Russia has deemed Japan as an unfriendly country. So they are actually portraying themselves, trying to portray themselves as, again, regaining some of the hard power that they used to have, but still they are going to increase their modernize their defense forces, because they don't have an army, they don't have like an offensive army, but they have the defensive forces, which per se is still an army, and it's very capable on its own.
Yeah.
And also they are going to do this with two main things, or three main things that we can point it out. First, they are going to increase the military spending up to 2%, so going 1% above the 1% cap that they already have. Second, and this is actually very important, they are planning on acquiring long-range cruise missiles that are actually capable of hitting China and North Korea. So this goes way beyond what is defensive.
Yeah.
And also, they are trying to do this on a diplomatic level too, because they are trying to foster the bilateral relationships with the UK, also with the US, and establish strategic partnerships with Italy, France, and surprise, surprise, with Canada.
There we go. And what was it? The awful acronym, the AUKUS agreement?
Oh no, don't talk about that.
Anyways, I think this leads well into what the other prediction is that was quite juicy that I had picked up on, which is from Ian Bremmer and his Eurasia group, who publishes a list of 10 biggest predictions of 2023. I would recommend you check it out. It's a pretty nice list. But they also include their 5 red herrings. And one of those is this statement: Taiwan isn't set to become a crisis in 2023. They figure that China will remain focused on their internal crises first, suffer through COVID, and then as a Russian war of aggression in Ukraine unfolds, then they're going to calculate their odds, which will be most likely 2024 or later. What do we think of our man Bremer? What do you think of?
What do I think about Ian as a person?
Well,
nice guy.
I want to tag him in the tweet, grab some publicity, but go for it.
I'm going to be very precise in this because in the interest of time and because it's a topic that we already kind of covered. It depends. Because it depends on what the global situation is, purely because if all of the Western allies end up expending their equipment supporting Ukraine and China feels they can get away with it, China could be very liable to say, okay, hey-ho, let's go and just invade Taiwan. Let's be honest. There's nothing really holding China back in terms of COVID because the Chinese government doesn't care anymore. They've let it rip now and they've said, you wanted freedom, you get freedom, this is why you should have listened to us. And so they're going to let this happen, and they may get in some vaccines to alleviate the concerns. But I think if they feel they can get away with it, they will invade Taiwan, and they will not care. And they can do it quite quickly. However, there's something that's quite interesting as well, is that we've seen some analysis in strategic simulations that show that more often than not, if the US can avoid being locked out of the Taiwanese Straits, Taiwan can beat back China just under punitive and painful results, which is the main thing,
Yeah, because it's also a very, I don't want to delve too much in the strategic aspect, but it's a very it's not as easy to go across that strait. I think it can only be done
Yeah.
in certain weather conditions, in certain
Yeah.
limited time scale, which is probably spring 2023 if it were to happen. And I think,
At the earliest, yeah.
well, even at the, I think the waters aren't correct into summer or past that to
Okay.
even launch it easier. And I think COVID is still a focus. And as much as you say they don't care about COVID, they care about the economy. And I think COVID impacts the economy,
Yes.
and in Taiwan will also impact your ability to re-enter the global stage after this wave of COVID. But any other thoughts on this side of the table as we move through our predictions lists?
In my opinion, so China has a different way of acting than us Westerners. So they are learning.
Or just they could say we're learning, but go on.
They could say, but what I mean is this situation so we usually establish this parallel between what is happening in Ukraine and what could happen in Taiwan. So basically, this is a test on how to react. And on another hand is like China has a different time pace than we do.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they work out differently and they work out silently. So that doesn't mean that by the fact that they are not doing anything, or that we perceive it not doing anything, that doesn't mean that something's not happening. And here I bring again the case of the militarization of the islands. They continue militarizing the islands in the South China Sea, so they continue expanding their influence there. They are continuing on their approach, their ring approach, so the three-ring approach, which the first one covers actually Taiwan. So I think that they are going to keep on with this type of strategic approach up until a point that they reach at least a parity to compete with the US regional-wise.
Mm.
And then we can start to see some problems unfold.
Okay, interesting. Let's move on from the international stage. We're going to go a bit more domestic. But before we do, another quick question to ask around the table, poll our own 2023 attitudes. If you could attend, let's say you're head of state for your country, if you could attend just one geopolitical gathering of the year, which one would you go to? And it could be G20, Davos, which already wrapped up, the Munich Security Conference, COP28, maybe the European political community.
MSC. I would love to go to the Munich Security Conference. That's going to be very interesting this year. It's going to be very interesting this year.
Yeah, especially auspices of the second year of the war and everything. Yeah, I
and
think
also the European military industry being built up this year.
Fair enough. Yeah. Any thoughts on this side?
G7.
G7, or isn't that G6 now?
Huh?
Without Russia. Or am I missing my numbers?
No, it was G8.
My bad.
No.
I thought we lost one.
Became G7. I think G7 is rising more and more in international importance, because in a way it represents the unified face of, let's say, what people would call Western interests, and I think it's rising more and more in relevance, in importance, and decisions are really made. Important global decisions are made and decided in that very small forum.
So, Joao, EPC, it's held in Moldova this year.
No, not EPC. No. I actually go for the Munich conference. Yeah, for me, I think it's the most important one. Although I would like to stress out, is it good that world affairs are actually dealt by just 7 states?
They're not world affairs.
Hey, Canada's in it, so come on. Can't complain. Can't complain. Anyways, moving to more regional stuff going on. I see you're shuddering here in your seat. There's a bunch of elections going on this year, and a bunch of think tanks and learned people have been putting out predictions going forward. I know there's a big election happening in Spain at the end of the year, which is going to be really interesting with the presidency coming up as well. But we're not going to focus on that one. We're going to focus on the one which has some maybe predictions for the right-wing, strength in Europe, the Polish election, and from the ECFR, who published their own list of predictions. So the European Council on Foreign Relations, they published their own list of predictions for the EU for 2023. And Mark Leonard and Jeremy Shapiro argue that the Polish Law and Justice Party loses the parliamentary election, and the new government will settle Polish disputes with the European Union and Germany.
All right. Can we do 2 minutes per response?
Let's go for it.
Keep the
Time is ticking, I will say. Apologies.
Yes. I think that that PiS, the Law and Justice Party in Poland, has a real chance of losing the election. However, the biggest impediment is the unity of the opposition. and whether they're able to rally around a single candidate, and that it remains also a big impediment to whether Erdogan will lose elections. They are doing very well when it comes to geopolitics, and that's why I said that Poland is a very sleeper geopolitical power that is developing an incredibly strong, and rightly so, military that protects the eastern border of the European Union, honestly, like no other. Whether they win the elections, I think, will be a toss-up. I think it's too close to call, and I don't want to make a call because I think predictions are just a wrong way to look at politics.
You say this, I have 45 minutes in this podcast.
Yeah,
Go on.
But the second one.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. We're keeping it at 2 minutes. So
all right.
Save your fire.
I was ready for 2 minutes for both.
Listen, let's go for it. Let's just do it. 2 minutes for both.
Just to introduce, the second one that we are talking about is that Piotr Zalewski from The Economist predicts that Erdogan will lose the 2023 election. With all the tension and stuff going on. Yeah, so
how can he lose the election when he's literally willing to throw anybody in jail that's willing to run against him? Like, come on, this is not a democracy anymore.
But you could argue his recent actions on the world stage have been showing that he's a bit more. He has something to prove at least somewhere.
Yeah, because he's rallying up his ultra-nationalistic base because he went.
But why does he need to?
Why does he need to? Because he realizes that his ass is on the line.
But you just said that he couldn't lose.
I didn't say he couldn't lose. He's dug a pretty good position for himself in a good and a bad way. But I'm really afraid that if he sees that the elections are slipping from his hand, which right now odds are not looking good, but the elections are still manageable, I would say, for him. But if he sees it not looking good for him, he's gonna look to rattle. Been there, done that. He's gonna look to rattle some things. It's probably gonna be Syria. He's gonna piss off the Americans there. Might be Cyprus, and I fear it might be the Eastern Aegean in Greece. But let's see.
Let's give it the next 2 minutes. Joao or Julien? Who wants to go first?
Okay.
Joao?
Okay.
2 minutes for both?
For both, yes.
I know Nikos proposed and took 5, but go on.
Okay, Nikos already touched most of the points that I would touch. So, yeah, in a way, for Polish elections, it can actually go both ways, and I totally agree with the assessment of Nikos in terms of geopolitical importance, and I would add also its importance to the internal market too, because they are very, very much anchored there. And also they are very, very important strategically for the US. They are one of the US's favorite allies strategically in Europe. So for Erdogan, yes, it can also actually have a chance for losing. Just we need to understand if the Social Democrats in Turkey actually have what it takes, because Erdogan is facing like a huge amount of issues. Like inflation is ramping. Like if here inflation is bad, there it's 100%. Inflation. So imagine.
I saw this great quote from this Dutch guy complaining about Turkey, where he was like, "My used Lego has more value than the lira."
Yeah, but the thing is, it is not being like this for now because of the current situation. It's been this since 2017, when they had the riff with Donald Trump, and actually their currency plummeted. And also because of and nowadays with these authoritarian drives, maybe it can actually push for the opposition to actually be able to win the election.
Because my argument is, I mean, sure, the opposition might not be strong, but for me, a dictator is only as good as long as he keeps his people somewhat satisfied. And for me, inflation is the thing that cuts the deepest at people. And I think that's what's going to cause these tensions, and that's why we've seen posturing elsewhere, because he has no idea how to address an inflation crisis. I mean, nobody does.
No,
we don't
actually, he's been addressing, but poorly.
Yeah.
Actually, people say that the inflation, most of it is actually due to his own politics. But I mean, that's up for debate. And so I would just like very quickly to stress out other type of elections that we should be paying attention to. First, Pakistan, very important traditional U.S. ally in that region, and can actually Khan, that was ousted by from this, of the previous prime minister was ousted from office with the censure vote, and he was blaming the US for doing that, and now he's running again, and he can actually win the election. So that's the prediction. And since the US actually lost influence in Afghanistan, we would see how they would square with the fact that they were going to lose another potential ally in the region. And then I would just like to stress out Spanish and Finnish elections. It can in some way help to understand if Europe is actually turning right, because there is a possibility for the right-wing coalition to actually win in Finland and also in Spain. But Spain, it's more dubious. It's a little bit more difficult. And also, last point is to stress out the importance of the elections in Nigeria. So it's a country that is plagued by ethnical conflicts, and they are on the way again. And also, it is very important for us to actually look on this country because it has one of the biggest reserves of oil and gas.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Julien, your moment to shine. Do your political analysis.
I'm going to take it as far as I can. So, I agree with Joao on all those elections, especially Nigeria, and I'm glad someone else is paying attention to that election because no one seems to care, which I find baffling. But I think, how dare you? But
I'll invite the Nigerian embassy on. How about that?
That would be a fun podcast. But all of the European elections right now are important because they're going to give us a snapshot into what we can expect next year. Point. In PIS's position, I think it's exactly the same because this is going to give us an idea of how strong the far right is going to be in the EP next year. The Turkish elections, I'm with Nikos on this because of the fact that Erdogan can do what he wants and he's going to get away with it if he tries hard enough. And he can also win purely based on the fact that he's already arrested the opposition leader and he's now trying to figure out if he can gets him excluded from the election from having been arrested on this point.
He excluded him.
Did he actually exclude him?
Yeah.
Was the decision made?
Çavuşoğlu is trying to find a way to appeal it, but he cannot run as things stand.
I thought that the decision had been made yet. Okay, damn. So, then already there's that. So now the question for Erdogan is, have his policies been bad enough for Turkish people that he loses this election? And I'm going to say polls are BS, don't believe them. But it also depends on, can he look like the best of the rest? So if all the opposition candidates don't have a good, credible plan or good, credible background, Erdogan can win by default before he even resorts to the whole dictatorship and authoritarian action. But the elections this year are going to be fun. But I'm not going to say that anybody should be saying who's going to win, who's going to lose, because we can't. We know usually the day of when the exit polls come out what we can expect. And even then, sometimes they're wrong.
Okay. Well, we have a few more minutes left, not much, because we have a time limit today. So let's transition to our last topic we want to talk about. But beforehand, we'll do another quick round of fun questions to give us less fun. But what do you think the biggest tech story of 2023 will be? And I'll give you 3 options, unless you want more. So AI will be the booming headline of the year. Twitter will actually shut down, which didn't actually happen last year. It's sad to see. Or the TikTok will be banned in the US and they'll try to pressure the EU to do the same, which I think is actually a good shout for something to go for. But anyways, around the table, any words?
There was a study that was released yesterday that that the chatbot AI that was released very recently by
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT that was released very recently passed all the exams for the Wharton School of Business to get an MBA. I think we're really underestimating how this is going to change our lives and how the fact that this thing exists right now and it could be commercialized can make redundant a lot of jobs that exist right now in the world, first and foremost in Brussels, might I add. So I think understanding its commercial power that I think the public is seeing right now for the first time, and people that haven't worked with AI, which are a lot of people as much as the tech geeks may not understand, and I think regulating it will be a big major step.
Yeah, and there's major pressure to get the AI Act done and wrapped up in the next few months, which we'll see of that. But anyway, I can't comment as somebody working for Microsoft. Joao or Julien?
No, I totally agree with Nikos. I think that's the thing that is going to be headlighting the year. So the AI, and actually how good it's going to be our European response to it.
Fair enough.
The AI Act, so let's see how it plays.
Julien,
I'm the same. I think the AI is going to be the big story this year, and having also played around with it a lot, experimenting to see what it's capable of, it's beyond our wildest imagination. Just this year alone, like if you look at the development of Chat GPT and even things like Cactus AI, the things it can do is astounding. It is absolutely mind-boggling. And this is still in a prototype stage as well. Like we're not even seeing the full capabilities of this thing. It's incredible.
They probably can't.
They probably can't, yeah.
The full capabilities exist. They shouldn't right now be put out
anywhere near us.
For a whole number of reasons.
Can you imagine with the arguments we have on this podcast what me and Nikos would do to each other with AI? This would be horrific.
AI, Nikos and AI, Julien.
I was thinking of trying to find this Chat GPT thing and get it to write my script for this podcast, gather all the headlines for me, but Anyway, last one, and the biggest one, as some people would say, the biggest prediction for 2023 comes from our friend over on those French coasts, Macron, who says in his New Year's address, which he does on December 31st, I don't know if that's a French thing or anything, that's not New Year's, it's Old Year, as the Dutch would say.
No.
And anyways, he says 2023 will be the year of pension reform. And I want to know our thoughts about it, because that's gone over swimmingly well in the past month or so. But I do think there's a big case to be made for this, because even I think a few days ago, Prime Minister Rutte of the Netherlands was also saying in response to the IRA stuff, well, maybe we shouldn't be going on the massive EU-wide, funding stuff again. We should instead be looking internally to cut down maybe on our pension spendings, being very frugal of him. So there's an argument to be made that we are spending as Europe, not even France in particular, too much on these social programs, and that's what's causing us to be uncompetitive in the worldwide scene. But regardless, maybe I'm drawing the picture a bit too wide.
Julien, do you want to be first or last?
You guys go first, because I'm interested to hear what your points of view are, because I know what I'm going to say, but...
Mr. Pontus.
Go ahead.
No, please.
No, I'll give you the floor.
All right, man. You know what? The older I get, and the more I work, the more I realize how important
sounds like a 40-year-old man.
The labor laws are. I'm not really hardcore in this view, but but undoubtedly they're extremely important. Now, we cannot go on like this with the current labor market, the way how young people can go to the pension. It's a difficult truth, and I understand it. And you know what? I look at myself and I'm like, I will probably not go in pension until I'm 70 if I ever go. I reiterate the fact that I'm Greek. And it's difficult and sometimes very painful. I'm not saying I agree with or disagree with the pension reforms of Macron. That's an internal thing for France, and Julien can tell us more on that. But I will say that the model that we have now in Europe, in a number of countries, and in a pan-European level, is just not sustainable. Because as a young person, I cannot be working all my life to sustain pensions of other people, when in reality, I will probably not see a pension myself unless I make my private savings or I establish and secure my future on a personal level. So that's the painful truth from a young person's perspective, and people can go and protest as much as they want. They have every right to do, but the hard truth sometimes hurts because it's the truth.
It's interestingly put, because you'd think that more right-wing parties would be trying to grab that rhetoric, which you don't see them landing on. But anyways, come on, Joao.
So okay, this is an interesting discussion what has been happening in France, because we can discuss the morality of it, and also we can discuss the structural effects that it has. For instance, it has been for years, because it's not only been Macron, a lot of other French presidents tried to actually reform the pensions system in France. Because it says that he has, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Julien, I think he have like 48 different type of rules or subsystems.
There are a lot.
Like this.
There are a lot.
So it looks like really cumbrous, and some people actually say that it is Byzantine. So I don't know
sure.
if it is a Greek reference or something, but
The Byzantine was super complex.
yes. So I think they nailed with the description. So that's how things go. So it is important on that sense to actually make it uniform. And the other thing is, we need to understand nowadays what we want from our generational pact. Because having reforms, having pensions is actually what it is about. We tend to believe that we discount now for one day to have but it's not true. We discount now for some people who is retired now to have the right to have the pension. So we discount to our parents, to our grandparents. This is our generational pact. But the issue is the current system actually going to allow us to, when we reach the retirement age, to actually have a pension? Maybe not, because the system was built under industrial perspective. So when we have like a secondary type of economy that produces perhaps generated more money, more revenue, that actually allowed us to have later on capability to pay for a social welfare state, which nowadays is not the case. So we need to really strike a balance on this situation. And also I would reiterate what Macron has said last year in his August 2022 speech, the end of abundance. So, and this end of abundance is not only about social welfare, it's also about our way of life. So the system will change. If it is a need for it to change, I will leave to the discussion or to the assessment of every person. But the system is changing.
All right, Julien, arm the minigun and start shooting.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 points. Yes, the president always says a speech to the French people on the evening of the 31st of December every single year. Just 1 point. And second point, just to remind everybody, I am a member of Macron's party. I am a member of Renaissance. And I personally do agree with the reforms as they are.
Objective analysis.
Yes.
Just be clear, because I don't agree with everything about it, but let's be honest. So taking back from what my lovely colleagues have said, it is true that a lot of us aren't sure. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and really, I almost forgot my age for a second there. And I'm 30 years old, and I'm still not sure if I will actually be able to retire. So, I mean, I'm in a position where I'm currently, having to invest so that I have some kind of pension, because there's one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that we have a shared pension system-ish in Europe, where if you rack up points in another country, you can take them back to an extent to another country and all this kind of thing, or have them paid into a foreign bank account. But for people like us who move around a lot, we don't actually meet up certain requirements for pensions, like a certain amount of working time in a country. Like in France, it's 100 and something semesters or whatever. And this is something where in many ways I do sympathize with a lot of people, because a lot of us aren't sure if we'll be able to retire. We won't sure what our pension is going to look like, because the system as it is now feels unbalanced. And a lot of the times, especially in countries like France, when we try to reform, we see a lot of protests that actually prevent things from being, let's say, fairer in some ways and maybe more balanced. And a few years ago, Emmanuel Macron and the government then tried to push forward an even more fair and a less biased pension reform system that was based on Thomas Piketty's analysis and planning. But the problem was that politically it was absolutely annihilated, because the left and the far right just decided that they weren't interested in it. And even though it took key tenets from Thomas Piketty's own work, Thomas Piketty went live on television in France and said it was an abomination that needed to be killed. Like, that's the system we're dealing with in France, where it's so politicized and polarized. Getting these things through is almost impossible. But the reason why I support the reform and think it's going to go through is that inherently it does good things. We're looking at a minimum pension of 1,200 euros for everybody. I mean, everybody that retires gets a minimum of 1,200 euros, which at a certain point in life is good.
It's 85% of the minimum wage, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that, yeah. And on top of that, we're not making a huge increase in the pension age now. We're looking at adding 2 years. And at 64 years old, it's still going to be the lowest in Europe, if I'm not wrong.
But there is one thing there. It's you need to have 43 years of working.
Yes, exactly, which is where the whole problem of traveling around a lot happens.
Yeah.
There are things that, one point I've not looked into is the question of pénibilité. So people who have extremely hard work and difficult lives, I think they can retire earlier in this system still, and some of the special regimes will still exist to an extent for periods of times for certain people. But ultimately, this is the question we all need to ask ourselves, is what do we want our reforms, our pensions to look like in our retirement? Because many of us won't retire until in our 70s. And that's a problem for some people. And I would even say Maybe good old von der Leyen should be looking at pushing for some unified European pension rules.
Touchy.
We should,
the European level on pension reform.
Speaking about Byzantium.
Both. Yeah. But I think we should let the podcast linger on that perhaps
Yes.
sour note. Thank you a lot, Julien.
No,
I would
a
be
good
positive.
note to all our listeners, start saving money.
Yeah, that's a good way.
If
That's
you-
our
if
New
you-
Year's.
if you can.
Yeah. I mean, looking at myself now, I really should. But regardless, I think that wraps up our beautiful little podcast for our, kicking off 2023. I'm glad to you who have made it to this point in the podcast. Thank you for listening so much.
Thank you for surviving.
Yes,
Yeah,
if
of
you
course.
would like to see a different topic, please let me know. Please just drop me an email in the description. If you want to be on the podcast, do the same. And if you want to stay tuned, listen to the following episodes. We have a great lineup coming up, more individual podcasts, as well as hopefully some more of this lovely panel, who I thank very much for being here today, in the future. So please subscribe, like, share, comment, and all the good things. But until next time then,
All the
goodbye,
best.
everybody.
Ciao, ciao.